Good evening. Thanks for folks who've joined. We're going to be starting in about 2 to 3 minutes. We have some other folks who have registered, and so we want to get folks, we're going to give people, a couple minutes to join. I am Rosalind Murphy of Murphy Media 360. Good evening. We're so happy that you're joining Edwina Martin-Arnold as she takes us through writing romance, Edwina style. So we're going to start in about 2 minutes. I just want to check and make sure we have most of our registrants here. I'll go on mute for about 2 more minutes. So thanks everybody. Get ready. Hello, we still have people coming in. Awesome. So just a little bit of housekeeping to start. We're asking everyone to mute and at least during the presentation. We will be asking you, definitely ask questions. I will be checking in the chat feature. So if you can mute your phones and we'll start. I think we got a good number of people in here, but just kind of checking. We have a few more who've registered. So Edwina, give me a nod. It's okay. Another like 2, 3 minutes.
What time is it?
It's 9 o'clock.
Oh, 1 minute. I just believe in that people's time is valuable and start as close to time as we can. So how
definitely agree. So let me go ahead and start recording.
Alrighty. Alrighty, since you're recording, I will start. Was there more you wanted to say, Roz?
Yes, I did. So I just want to say, everyone, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have Edwina give us her advice and sharing her journey with us. So again, please, housekeeping is just to keep it on mute and put your questions in the chat. Edwina, we're ready. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you, Roz. I really, oops, am I on mute? Nope. Thank you. I really appreciate you setting this up. Technology is wonderful. If you guys didn't know, Roz is in New York, and I think we have people on the line from all across the country. I see Nikki from Florida, and I see people from all around between Facebook Live and Zoom. So technology is absolutely wonderful. So just a little background, as you can see on this first slide, I've written a few books and I spent 19 years in school. So if somebody told me I had to take another course to learn how to write, I would have pulled out my hair and ran the other way. I was so sick of school. So I am self-taught. So I'm telling you, and I've been published since 2001, I believe. So I'm self-taught and I'm sharing with you how I write and the principles that I use. And so I'm really excited to share this with you. And before I start, one other thing that I wanted to say was I had to organize it some way for you guys to understand it, but nothing is cut in stone the way I have it. So you can do things out of order. But of course I had to put some other type of order in it. Also, if you are joining us on Facebook Live, on the bottom right, if you hit share, it will share to your friends and we can have an even bigger audience. So if you would do that, that would be fantastic. So next slide, please. Roz is flicking the sides from New York. So I'm telling you, technology is absolutely wonderful. So while Roz is taking us to the next slide, I'm going to start talking about why romance. Well, let me give you some reasons why you should want to write romance. According to NPR, romance is $1 billion industry, a lot of money. And also according to NPR, romance outperforms all other book genres. And then according to squarespace.com, 46% of romance writers read a book a week. And Roz, if we could advance to the next slide, that would be wonderful. So 46 people carry at least a book a week, or carry around or read a book a week. Go back just one.
Yeah, it's
Is it being weird on you?
no, it's good. It's a couple of seconds delay. So I have to also be patient on my side. So let me try that again. I think I've hit it 3 times because it's a little slow.
Okay. So I'll go on. So according to Squarespace, 29% of romance readers carry a book at all times. And that would be me, although I don't have to carry a physical book anymore. I have everything on my Kindle on my phone that I carry around. And Harlequin, they sold a book last year every 3 minutes. So the point I'm trying to make is the almighty dollar. There's a lot of money in romance writing, but that's not why I write romance. I write romance because I absolutely love it. I've been reading romance all of my life. And here we go. Here's the slide. I've been reading romance all of my life. And so I was just absolutely thrilled that I was able to turn something I love, actually become a part of the party, actually write some books. So there's the slide, and I'll just recap a little bit. It's $1 billion industry, outperforms all other book genres. 46% read a book a week. 29% carry their books around with them, and Harlequin sold a book every 3 seconds. So that's why I say, if you're, those are financial reasons to write, but I write because I love it. So next slide, please. So the first thing that I say to anybody who asks me how to write a book is you have to read. You absolutely have to read in order to write a book. As I said, I've been reading romance all of my life. And so then when I wanted to write one, I started reading for a different purpose. I started reading to dissect the book, to see what they were doing. So now I'm writing an autobiography about my husband. It's called Black Genius Incognito, because he's a Black genius incognito. I went and I spent a month reading autobiographies so I would know how to do it. And this isn't something that Edwina Martin-Arnold came up with. Stephen King actually said it. You have to absolutely, you have to read to write, because everything has a formula, right? And so if you can figure out the formula, you can follow that formula. So that's my first tip. Read, read, read. Next slide, please. Now here's where I battled with myself. Do I want to put character development first, or do I want to put conflict first? So this is the part where, you don't have to go in exact order. So character development, you have to decide, and I'm speaking of romance, you have to decide who your characters are. So you need a heroine, who is the woman, and you need a hero. Then you have to say, what's their occupation? What do they do? How do they look? What's their issue? And, doing this for 20 years now, I have picked up some of the technical terms. The people who teach romance tell you that that's the inner conflict of the person. But what is their issue? They have to have some vulnerability, and they have to have some growth. So I found this slide on character development that was the closest to what I try to do. The process of creating a persona for your story. And that they have to go through changes. There has to be personal growth and experiences. So the secondary characters, the whole purpose of the secondary characters in my books are to support the main story and keep it moving. So you can't make the secondary characters so strong that they take over your story, right? Because the main characters are the ones that are driving your story, and the secondary characters have to move the story along. Now, there's another purpose for secondary characters. They can be featured in your sequel, and romance readers love sequel. So my Chocolate Friday series, I have Chocolate Friday, then I have Vanilla Chocolate, which is the second one in the series, and now I'm currently writing Chocolate Drop. So the secondary characters can have their own story later on. And I resisted this. I did not want to have sequels because I thought I was cheating because I already had a lot of the work done about who these people were. And I wanted to come up with a unique story every time I wrote. And this is where the almighty dollar kind of affected what I did a little bit, because your readers want sequels. Not only the almighty dollar, but also what your readers want. You know, you want to cater to what your readers want to see or read. And so readers want sequels. And so I adjusted to that. And I have to admit, I'm having fun writing my sequels. And so the next slide, please. Next, we have, and Facebook Live, we're going Zoom into Facebook Live, and Facebook, there's a 20-second delay. So just keep in mind, you might be hearing stuff a little late, but hey. Okay, what is the main conflict? Really, that's the first thing I think of. You gotta have a good conflict, because nobody wants to read a story about two people who are getting along all the time. Nobody wants to read that. And by the way, Roz, if somebody has a question, feel free to interrupt me and ask the question. Hey, Connie Bonnie, I see you.
Sure. We have 2 questions in the box. Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, go ahead and ask me the question.
So let's get to the question. So
okay.
The first one, can you explain your writing process? Yes, can you explain your writing process and how you create a storyline? What is your favorite book that you have written so far and why?
Chocolate Friday is my favorite book, just because I giggled the whole time I wrote it. It was just at some points naughty to me. So and I'm giggling now. I mean, I get a kick out of Chocolate Friday. So that's probably one of the favorites, but you know, they're each special for their own reason. You know, Eve's Prescription was my first book. So Eve's Prescription will always be near and dear to my heart. So all of them, I won't go through all 9, but I have to admit, Chocolate Friday was the first one that came to mind. So we'll go with that. And then my writing process, so I'm kind of describing it, but really, if you go to the conflict slide, which I think is the next slide.
Next slide, okay.
And don't forget, share, if you're on Facebook Live, hit the bottom right corner to share this video with your friends. So I come up with a conflict first. So for example, with Twice Tempted, the conflict here, and I might be getting ahead of myself, ideological differences. The conflict here is that he is a cop and she's a defense attorney. And so you can see the inherent conflict there, that he's the cop arresting people, and here she is, you know, fighting to get to let the people free. So they had ideological differences. And the main conflict of the story, I just jotted a couple down. Ideological differences, like Twice Tempted, House Guest. The conflict was, she owned a small women's clinic, and he was a bodyguard, and he found some of her services distasteful. You can have abandonment as a conflict. In Jolie's Surrender, one of the major conflicts there was he left her, he was in high school, and he left for basketball scholarship, and he didn't think he could focus on basketball and love her the way that he loved her. So she considered that to be abandonment. And so 10 years later or 15 years later, they get back together. Cultural differences. In Vanilla Chocolate, you know, he's white and she's black. So there's some cultural differences there. I have a book, Built to Last, and I forget which one of my, I have 3 books that are collections of short stories. But in Built to Last, she's kind of a spoiled brat, and he's a hardworking man. And so that kind of was their conflict. You can have, like in Chocolate Friday, he's perceived to be a playboy, and she's extremely conservative. So those are some of the major conflicts. And believe me, I mean, it's 2020. Humans have been on this earth for a long time. So there is no story that you can think of that hasn't been done before. That's my firm belief. I mean, I really enjoyed Avatar, and I was like, oh, here's a story that maybe they haven't done before, because it's big giant blue people on another earth. But when you got down to what the themes were, it's the same stories over and over, but the beauty is how you tell it, how you get there. There's 50 million ways to get there. So you come up with your conflict, and then you use your own brain or whatever to make it unique. Hopefully I'm making sense to everybody. So that's the main conflict. And if we go to the next slide.
And so we do have some questions. They're coming in fast. So this one says, when you first started writing, was there a style or an author you tried to emulate?
Oh, yes. I'm dating myself now. My first book was published in 2001. J. California Cooper. Yes. And Octavia Butler. And so, Octavia Butler, she lived in Seattle for a time. And so I would see her occasionally. But what I loved about their writing style was they could convey so much in just a minimal amount of words. And so I really, really tried to kind of make my writing style like theirs. One of my favorite authors, Beverly Jenkins. She writes absolutely wonderful books, and she writes romance books. And she writes historical romances. And I read this book 20 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, but it still sticks in my head. It's called Indigo. I don't know if any of you out there have read that. Have you read Indigo?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. It's a historical romance. The main character is a former slave, and her hands are purple because she had to work in the, she was dyeing, I can't remember what color. Well, it was obviously blue and purple because her hands were blue, but they were dyeing the material. And that's what she did when she was a slave. So in the book, she had to wear gloves so the slave catchers wouldn't see her blue hands, and try to take her back into slavery. So anyway, Beverly Jenkins, she's still writing books today. Absolutely wonderful books. Were there any other questions before I go?
We do. Yes, so I guess we can.
I guess we can.
Yeah, any number that you can.
So everyone, I think it's Michelle. If you could go on mute. Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem. So yes, just a reminder to stay on mute, and then we get to the Q&A, we will open it up so we can kind of go. But we have a couple of questions. I'll try to sprinkle them in, but I thought this one was also all of them. How long did your first book take to write versus your last?
Oh, well, each book is unique. So Eve's Prescription was my first book. And when I first wrote it, I wasn't intending on getting published. It was just a relief for me. I had 3 kids. I was driving my poor husband crazy. I'd come home from work. So I was taking care of the kids. So my husband would come in at 5 o'clock, and I would be all over him, and I'd be talking to him like he was a child and driving him crazy. So he said, look, we got to do something. So every Monday, John would take the kids to daycare, even though I was a stay-at-home mom. And I wrote every Monday. And after a year, I had like 140 pages of Eve's Prescription. And so I still wasn't thinking about getting published. It was just something that I did that made me feel good. I always had a strong desire to write. And so I was fulfilling that desire. So I let my family read it and a few other people. And some of you have heard this story, but it's funny. So my brother read it and he said, wow, this is a really great book. So I was a lawyer, or I still have my license, but I was a prosecutor for several years before I came home. And my brother said, this is a great book if you're writing a legal treatise. So that was his way of telling me it was very dry and boring. And, what are you doing here? So I had to change my writing style from legal to romance. So then I worked on it for about another year. And then I let people read it, and people said, hey, you should try to get it published. And then it took me a year to get it published. So this was a 3-year project. And I would say it took me 2 years to write it. Chocolate Friday took me a month to write, like I told you, and I giggled all the way through it. And the other ones are somewhere in between. The short stories, like this is a collection of short stories, those probably took me maybe a month. But the thing is, when you write, the hard part for me, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but what the heck? The hard part for me is getting that first draft done. Because even though I love to write and I have this strong desire to write, when I'm writing, a little voice in my head says, this is crap, this is crap, this is crap. And so I have to ignore that voice And once I can get a first draft done, oh, it's easy from there, because you can edit till the cows come home. But, you know, you just go back and clean it up and clean it up. And of course, I don't edit till the cows come home, because you would never get the book out. But for me, getting that first draft out is really the hardest part. So hopefully I answered the question in there.
Yes, you did. We can go to the next slide and then I'll ask a few more.
Okay.
Go
Minor conflicts. As my slide here says, minor conflicts are essential in my writing. Some people have only one major conflict. I like to have other little conflicts sprinkled in to help move the story along. And I'm trying to, like in Chocolate Friday, you have the main conflict where she thinks he's a playboy and she's pretty conservative. But then you have the side conflict of her former student who's a little off. And she presents little opportunities for conflict all through the story. So besides the main conflict, you need some other little side conflicts. But the other thing, just like your supporting characters or your secondary characters, you cannot let the minor conflicts take over the main conflict. The minor conflicts have to stay in their lane. You know, their purpose is to keep it interesting and to keep the story moving along. Next slide, please, or if you want to ask a question. Oh, have you guys seen my shirt? Can everybody see my shirt? My niece made it. So anyway, I'm pretty happy with my shirt. Okay, Roz, what was the next question?
So let's go here. Yes, so do you go about researching backgrounds for your characters?
Oh, I do. In the beginning, you know, the first book, I think I started researching in 97, 98, and I would find people who were doing the things that I wanted to write about. So in Eve's Prescription, I was a prosecutor, so I kind of had Eve's stuff down. She was a prosecutor. But the fireman, a very good friend of ours, let me question him to death about being a firefighter, got to go to the station, blah, blah, blah. So my first 3 or 4 books, it was me. For example, in Jolie's Surrender, my friend Selwyn is a zookeeper for Woodland Park Zoo. So she let me follow her around, question her to death, blah, blah, blah. But now you have the internet. Jeez Louise. You can do all of your research. You don't even have to go to the place. You can use Google Earth and be walking down the street, you know, and so that has made researching 100% easier. But it's still nice. It's still really nice if you can find somebody to question and ask and find out what it's like.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. And then we have, can you talk through some of the other romance genres?
Sure. You know, I wrote them down. I thought I might get this question. So I write contemporary romance. So contemporary is today. So I don't write historical. Historical romance would really require a lot of research because you got to get the period stuff right. You have to have the right clothing, the right food, etc. Because people can't wait to fact check you. So they will fact check you to death if you write a historical. So keep that in mind. And I write romantic suspense. House Guests and Twice Tempted are pure romantic suspense. Then you have erotic. I don't write erotic, but who knows? Science fiction, fantasy, paranormal, I kind of put them all in one category. And one that I don't put in that category that is really, really popular. People love to read about vampires.
What is it about vampires?
Yes. I mean, there's a whole genre with vampire romances. You know, vampires fall in love with vampires, vampires fall in love with people, vampires fall in love with werewolves. So it doesn't float my boat, but that is a very, very lucrative, strong genre. And then, you know, Western. I mean, Western is still, everybody wants to read about a cowboy. You know, I don't mind reading about a cowboy myself. I haven't written one, but that's another popular one.
Okay. And I'm the second part of that question, sorry, was
Okay.
what are your favorites throughout those? I think you said contemporary.
Well, my favorite to write is contemporary and suspense. I love reading historicals. Like I said, Beverly Jenkins writes some absolutely wonderful historical romances from a Black perspective. And, you know, when I first read hers, I was like, oh God, I mean, she's writing about romance and slavery days. And I just don't want I don't want to read bad stuff, you know, a lot of bad stuff. But she has strong, empowering characters. And she never, ever made me feel uncomfortable reading her books. So anyway, historical, I'm not a big fan of erotica. You know, to me, it's like when you wear clothes that show your shape and that's appealing, but if you're naked, you know, I don't know if I want to look. So, you know, I would rather see the clothes that show your shape, and I would rather write stories that, you know, there's a little innuendo there. It's not just grab it, you know, flip it, rub it down. Oh no, although I do like that song.
Yes.
So I'm not a big fan of erotica, and I don't want to write erotica. And I'm not I like science fiction. I like Dune. I'm dating myself again. Anybody out there know Dune? You know, you can raise your hand if you're on Dune.
Yes. Do you guys see the reaction box? You can actually raise your hand and do a thumbs up.
And I like watching, I love Star Trek. But I don't want to write it. And then, you know, I really love Outlander. Have you guys watched that on Netflix? Oh my God. It's like reading the Harlequin romances when I was a kid. When I first started reading, that's what it reminds me of a lot, but it's so well put together. But that's kind of fantasy. And so, no, I wouldn't write it, but I enjoy reading that and seeing it on the movie screen. And I enjoy a good cowboy one. I mean, everybody loves cowboy, right? So that's the answer to that question.
Thank you for going through those. And so we'll take this one and then we'll go back to the presentation. Do you ever find yourself getting stuck in writing?
Oh, you know, and I do, and I addressed that a little later on, but I was remiss. There's also, you know, LGBTQ. So there's women and women romances, same themes, and men romances. And so, you know, there's that's another big market too. That's very, very, very lucrative. Yes. I'm going to go ahead and bump ahead in the slide.
Okay.
I get writer's block and I force myself through it. I refuse to submit to writer's block. And 80% of the time I'm successful. But sometimes I'm not successful and I put it down, I put the manuscript down, and I don't look at it again for another 3-4 months. And, you know, that's not a good thing. So what I do is I force myself, I sit there and make myself write, even if it's just a paragraph. And I cannot get up from the table or wherever I'm at until I write something. Because as I said, everything can be cleaned up in editing. Everything. You just got to get that first draft done. So I refuse to submit to writer's block. Okay. We ready to move forward?
We are.
All righty. Those are great questions. Keep them coming. And don't forget, hit the share button at the bottom of your screen on Facebook Live. So tips. Oops, I'm sorry. Story development. Go back one.
Go back one? Okay.
Yeah, story development. So, you know, as I said, 20 years of doing this, I have rubbed against what the writing classes say. And this is a slide from that. And it talks about introduction of the book, rising action, climax, falling action. I just say there's a beginning, there's a middle of the book, and then there's an end of the book, right? In the beginning, you have to hook the reader. And I'm going to read some of the beginnings of my book, and you guys can tell me if I hook the reader or not. So this is the beginning of E's prescription. Let's see if I nailed it or not. Apprehension fires down Eve's spine as she approaches the front door of her best friend's house. She remembered Ebony's short voicemail. Girl, we found you a new domino partner. Be at my house by 7 o'clock on Friday so you can meet him. I give myself a B. It's kind of interesting, but I give myself a B on that one. Let's see how I started house guest, if I hooked anybody. Dr. Veronica Howell approached the Total Woman's clinic she owned and operated with a growing sense of dread. She lifted her shoulder-length black hair and rubbed the goosebumps she felt forming on her neck. Not again, she whispered, mentally preparing herself to see the ugliness someone had taken the time to scribble across the exterior of her single-story building. That's better, I think. You guys want to keep reading? What do you think? I think it's a little better, you know. Let's see, Chocolate Friday. By the Chocolate Friday, I think I'm getting much better with the hook. Olivia Anderson, are you a lesbian? My fork drops and clatters against the plate, which causes an agonizing moment of silence as the 20 or so people in the pancake house look at me. Good thing I hadn't been holding my orange juice. I think that's a pretty good hook. You know, it makes you want to say, why would her mother ask her that? Is she a lesbian? Is she not? Blah, blah, blah. I think it's a pretty good hook for the beginning. And let's see Vanilla Chocolate. I wake to the sound of a flushing toilet. Then I cringe in disbelief, realizing that I've given in to my guilty pleasure, a man, yet again. I think that's a pretty good hook. I give myself an A+. I give myself an A+ on that hook. So do you guys, I think you guys kind of get what I mean. You have to have something interesting at the beginning of the book, a hook, a really good hook, to keep them reading. The middle is the meat of the story. That's where I was talking about the conflict, the minor conflicts, your supporting characters, everybody's moving the story along, right, to a climax. Well, I don't necessarily agree with the climax falling in action because I try to keep mine interesting right in there until you get to the end of the book. But one thing you cannot do, you cannot resolve the conflict too quickly, right? Mm-hmm. If you resolve the conflict at the beginning of the story, the major conflict, well, what are you going to read the rest of the book for, right? So that conflict has to be resolved near the end of the book. And that's why you usually have the characters saying the magical, I love you at the end of the book, because they resolved all their issues. If you go, oh, that was just a great story. Man, I wish it hadn't ended. Then I've done my job. I feel really good if you get that awe feeling at the end of the book. So remember that. You can't resolve the conflict too quickly. And did you want to say something, Roz?
No, I was just looking. We have a couple more questions, so sorry.
Oh, okay. And then just let me say the end, they resolve their conflict, they admit their love, and everybody lives happily ever after. You know, I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag here if I tell you that every romance book ends up happy. They end up in love.
Yes.
What are the questions, Roz?
Yes, I think you've answered this a bit, but the person wants to say, first of all, thank you for being such a role model. When you write, are you generally writing about present day using current themes, music, and references, which I think you touched a little bit, but then they ask, have you written anything futuristic or from another time?
No, I have not. Great question. No, I have not written anything futuristic, but yes, I try to kind of look at what's going on in the current world today to get my themes. You know, I've always thought truth is stranger than fiction. So if you just pay attention to what's in the news and all that stuff, you can come up with some really great conflicts and really great hooks for stories. So hopefully I answered the question.
Yes, thanks. And then we have, as an African-American woman, have you faced any obstacles as a writer, and who keeps you encouraged?
Oh, shoot. As an African-American woman, I face obstacles every single day. Seems like you face microaggressions and blah, blah, blah. As far as writing, you know, I got rejected a lot early. I mean, the first offer to publish each prescription, you know, didn't come in right away. My husband is absolutely wonderful. He's always in my corner. And when I'm down, he lifts me up. My children, I get a lot of inspiration from them. I have great friends who read the book and say, Edwina, this is really good. You know, keep the faith. And my mother is one of my biggest fans. So yes, my family, they keep me going.
Awesome.
And then, you know, when I get really down, you know, I have a body of work now. I go back and read my reviews. It's like, hey, I can do this. Don't, just because somebody said something nasty to you, you know, don't let it bother you.
What process do you feel that you've experienced that the most? Is that during like the distribution phase, you know, when you're pitching it phase?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
So so the original question was, you know, as an African-American woman, you know, where have you felt challenged? And I was just wondering if there was a certain point in the process where you felt like it was a little bit more challenging, whether it was getting that distribution or if it was the purchase, pitching the project. And
you know, that's really hard for me to answer because, you know, 95, 96, I started seeing for the first time ever the African-American romances in the store, Black romances. And as I bought them, I was like, hey, this is so exciting. It was the first time I've been reading about white folks all my life. And so I decided I wanted to write a Black romance. And so there were 2 Black houses at that time, BET and Genesis Press. So those were the 2 that I targeted. I sent it to other ones, but of course, you know, I got the rejection letters. But I did eventually get to Harlequin. Harlequin, House Guest is a Harlequin book. So I faced challenges, but I don't know if I could separate it out and say it's my color is why. Okay. It's just, you know, the romance or getting published is tough. It was tough back then. So, but now the whole publishing industry has changed from 2000 to now. And you don't have to go through the houses to get your story out, to have your voice heard. You can do it yourself on Amazon, which is an absolutely wonderful thing. And since we're talking about that, 8 cents a book. That's what I got for this. 8 cents a book from Harlequin. These books, I get $2 a book because I self-publish them. So I don't know if I would go back to the houses. You know, I'm enjoying what I'm doing now. I have control of my content, and I have distribution. You know, so it's a whole new game. So I face challenges, but not because my color or that I'm a woman. Here's one of the biggest challenges I faced with Jolie Surrender that was hard for me. I love basketball. So I wrote Jolie Surrender and I put in a ton of basketball. And so it went through the editor at the house and she took it all out. I said, you took out my great basketball. And she said, no romance reader wants to read all that basketball. I said, yes, they do. Yes, they want to read basketball. But you know, if I wanted the house to publish the book, I had to take the basketball out. So I took the basketball out. So I had conflicts like that, but not necessarily because of my color or that I'm a woman.
That's interesting. I guess they haven't seen Love and Basketball, huh? The film.
Yeah, man, hurt my little feelings.
And so I will take one more before we go to the next slide. What is your process for naming your characters?
Oh, I'm terrible at it. At first, I was trying to do the shortest name possible because I hand wrote the first 2 books. So in Eve's prescription, her name is Eve, E-V-E. And then Jolie, it's a little longer, Jolie. But I was trying to keep them short. Sometimes I just look through the newspaper and pick out a name. But I will admit that naming is difficult for me. So there's no real process that I go through.
Thanks. I can go to the next slide then.
Alrighty.
Ooh, I went too fast.
Yep. Let's talk about some tips. Oh, I had a hard time with the first one. It's called point of view. And it means whose head are you in when you're talking? So I'm talking as Edwina from Edwina's perspective. If I'm talking as Edwina in the book, and then I switch to somebody else's head from their perspective, the reader gets real confused, right? And I'm gonna show you my own work where I'm doing some head switching and you're wondering, what in the world is she doing? Okay, So right now we're in Noah's head, okay? Noah looked at Eve's beautiful face, still glowing with excitement, and something inside him softened a little. So you can hear that we're in Noah's head, right? Makes sense? She finally met his stare. Where are we making reservations, Eve? And then Eve says, it was your excellent play that got us there, Noah, so you decide. Okay, the Mexican kitchen, Noah says. Eve smiled at his choice. Mexican kitchen was known, for making the best fajitas in the city. And Eve was delighted to go there because she loved the food. You see how I switched to Eve's head? I'm no longer in Noah's perspective. No, it should have been something like Noah picked that place because he knew that Eve liked the fajitas, right? So point of view, you have to stay in one person's head. And when you switch heads, you have to make it clear. And one way to make it clear is to make a new paragraph, right? I had all of that in one paragraph. So I'm head switching within the same paragraph, which is confusing. And I have to admit, I read one book where the dog had a point of view. So I was inside the dog's head, and I didn't like being inside the dog's head. It didn't seem realistic to me to be inside the dog's head. So you have to understand point of view, and people make it complicated, but it's just who's telling the story at that point in time. Is Edwina telling the story, or is John telling the story? And you have to be very clear when you switch heads.
Well, since you talked about the dog, like, have you ever had like where a character is a place? Like, for instance, I've seen several films like about New York. So New York would be the place, or LA would be the place. Could a character or point of view be the city, a place?
Well, there's the omnipresent narrator, right? And so when you have the omnipresent narrator, they're just telling you the story. So I suppose you could, if you want to make the building have some sort of live feature, yeah, you could, the building knew that it was a very old building and it had seen many residents come and go. And the building was really happy when the happy young woman walked up the stairs and came to live in his building. Yeah, I mean, so the building could have a point of view.
Thank you.
But in my I try to make my books as realistic as possible. And it's not realistic to me that dogs are building, they have a point of view. In books in the olden days, people didn't really have a point of view. It was just like the omnipresent narrator just telling you the story. Which brings me to my next point, show versus tell. So showing, this is showing. Let me read you some of Chocolate Friday. Forgive me while I find the spot. Okay. So this is Chocolate Friday. Now I could have told you that they were at a stripper show and a handsome man walked out onto the stage. But this is showing. I'm about to read the showing versus telling you. Okay. Let's see. Okay, my attention returns to the stage to see a pair of male hips rotating a perfectly shaped bottom as a female rapper screams from the speaker that she needs a roughneck. The sight robs me of thought. The man moves around the stage in a slow bop until he's facing the crowd. He's wearing an open jean jacket with no shirt underneath, and his pants hang low on his hips, exposing black boxers. His attitude is hard and his disposition is lazy, a real bad boy persona, complete with little gold hoop earrings in each ear. He saunters to the edge of the stage and scans the women slowly. And then here's another part. His chest, he's taking off his jacket now. His chest could have been sculpted from onyx. The muscles are dense, defined, and gleaming in the stage lights. As if to emphasize this, he raises a hand and runs it across his cleanly shaven head. The women scream in delight as he does a little jig with his abdominal muscles, all 6 of them. See how I'm showing you I'm not
Yes.
just telling you this was a fine brother with a bald head that came out on the stage.
Mhm.
That's telling. But sometimes you can't have the whole book showing because you'll never get through the book. So you do have to tell at some points to move the book along. But you should have a lot more showing in the book than telling. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to move forward.
Okay.
Every scene has to have purpose. Okay, Judith Kilgore, if you're listening to me, you really drove this into my head. If your scene doesn't have a purpose, take it out of the book. So when I'm going through my, I almost feel like saying, I don't even want to name it, writer's block. When I'm going through writer's block and I'm forcing myself to write, some of those scenes might be unnecessary. So if the scene is not moving your book forward, then it has no purpose and it should be taken out of your book because it's just weighing your book down. So let's talk about cliffhangers. The more cliffhangers you can have in a book, the better. So I'm gonna read from T2 to give you an example of a cliffhanger. So in this book, Samantha, the main character, she's in her car driving and she's being chased by another car. And that car actually causes her to crash. So Samantha's hand felt for the door handle. She's trying to get out of the car after the crash. She pulled and pushed desperately until the door flew open. She was fighting the airbag, trying to get out as the headlights covered her, and she swore she could feel the heat of the truck like it was breathing down her neck. The engine revved a loud growl, and galvanized by fear, Samantha flung herself from the car. Pain exploded from the top of her head as she hit something and flipped over upside down. Hurting and disoriented, she still struggled to keep moving. Ignoring the pain, she didn't need to turn her head to know the truck was coming for her. Although she still attempted to flee, she tensed for the impact she knew was imminent. So that's the end of my paragraph. So, that's a cliffhanger, right? You got to turn the page to chapter 6, and then I make you wait for it because I switch heads and I go into the hero's head, and you don't actually find out what happens to Samantha for a couple of pages later. But that's a pretty good cliffhanger that
it keeps it going.
Keep reading the book. And then writer's block. So you will notice that, all of the other stuff is capitalized. And when I got to writer's block, I put it in only the first letters capitalized it because I don't want to give writer's block any power. We want to minimalize and make writer's block not as important. So, and I've already discussed writer's block, so I won't go over it again, just that I forced myself to get through it. A couple of things that I've found to be incredibly helpful. When I said you have to read, you're reading for a multitude of things, but reading really helped my grammar because I really studied how authors that I admired put their sentence structure together. And it's, when you get into the fine art of writing, you can't have the same sentence structure over and over again because then it becomes monotone and boring. You have to vary your sentence structure. So sometimes I'll have short sentences, sometimes I'll have long, I mix them up, and it really is an art. And the only way I can say to get good at it is to keep reading and writing. But anyway, I got off track a little bit. Strunk and White is a very short book all about grammar. And so after I get that first draft done, I do not worry about grammar until I'm done with the whole book, because I can sit there switching periods and semicolons all day long. And I call it analysis paralysis. And I'm like that little gerbil on a wheel. I'll sit there on a wheel working on one sentence over and over and over again. So I don't even look at the grammar till the end of the book. But when I do look at the grammar, I have Strunk and White right beside me. And if I have a question, I just flip it open and figure it out. Strunk and White, I believe, is online now. You could probably, if you Google it, you could probably get it for free. It's very, very short grammar book. I also use Grammarly. They have a free version, but I went ahead and paid for it. Grammarly has been a great asset to check your grammar. And then Fiverr, if you're not familiar with that, Fiverr is just absolutely wonderful. when it comes to marketing your books, when you just need something drafted up real quick, most things on Fiverr are $5. But I actually got an editor from Fiverr. So editing, if you want somebody else to edit your book, they usually charge you like $2 to $3 grand, right? I got somebody on Fiverr to edit my book for $350, and they did an absolutely wonderful job editing my book. So Fiverr is absolutely wonderful. So, and I think we're near the end here.
Yes, you do have several questions, so we can go back to yes. So
if you flip the side, they can see my social media in case anybody wants to write it down or whatever. Oh, question and answer. And if you go to the next one, there we go. We can leave that one up.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer the
so
question.
we have a few, so this is good. We sprinkle some without. So this person says, what is a good program to have to write your book on? Do you use Microsoft Word or Google? Is there a good program for writing?
I use Microsoft Word. I have in the past. Like I told you, I hand wrote my first 2 books and then typed them in. But I have a Mac. So Mac for Word or Pages. Pages is great too. And I write a lot on my iPad and I do it in Pages. And then when I email it to myself, when you export it, you can have it convert to Word. So Pages and Microsoft Word have been absolutely wonderful for me.
Okay. Let's see what else we have. How do you limit the amount of POVs that you give your audience, or should you allow every influential character to have a POV, a point of view?
You know, when I first started writing, the hero and the heroine had a POV, and I've kind of stuck to that. But now I read a lot of books where it's only one POV. You're just, a lot of romance books now, or you're just in the woman's head the whole book. And then they have to come up with creative ways to show how the man is feeling, in my opinion. But I think it just works better to have both the man and the woman's POV. When I do suspense, like in House Guest, I had the POV of the bad guy too. In Chocolate Friday, I give the POV of the girl who's a little unbalanced. So, and at the most, I think I have 3 POVs at the most.
That was a great question. Let's see. You mentioned you read reviews. How do you keep from internalizing reviews that are critical of your work? And have you used any constructive criticism that you received?
Yes, I struggle to stay open, right? But let me tell you, you write this book, it's like your baby. And, you know, I have 3 kids and the oldest one is 28, but if somebody called her ugly, I'm still ready to fight. You know, and that's how I feel about the book. And so I have to check myself because, you know, I didn't come out just knowing how to write. A lot of people gave me really good constructive criticism. Like when my friend Judith Kilgore was telling me, this scene does not move the book forward, Edwina, take it out. It's like, no, my scene is good. What are you talking about? My book is good. Well, you tell me how this moves the book forward. You know, so you have to be able to listen. But ultimately, it's on you. So you use your judgment, you know. So what I'm saying is I struggle and I do my best to listen and listen for what's good and for what I agree with. But, you know, if I don't agree, I have no problem leaving it too. So.
Great.
You got to put your ego out the door.
Definitely.
Sorry.
So you got and love your shirt and also love your picture, by the way, on your social media. So Writing Diva, I want to make sure that I didn't miss any. Let's see. I think this came earlier, but I didn't mention it. Can you recommend self-publishing companies for those of us just starting out?
Whoo, no, I can't. I can give you some advice. If they're asking you to pay them, don't do it. You should not have to pay for anything. So if they're asking you to pay them, don't do it. You know, it took me, So Twice Tempted, I was still, I had a 2-book deal with Harlequin. And I won't go into the reasons why, but I didn't fulfill, this is the first book, I didn't fulfill the second book. I wrote this book like 10 years later, right? And so I sent it to Harlequin because I couldn't remember what the contract said. And I figured if Harlequin rejected it, then, you know, I would be okay with the contract. They actually sent me a really nice note. They remembered me. They said, Edwina, our genre has changed a little bit. If you want to do this, that, and the other to the book, we'll relook at it. But then I just decided to self-publish it on Amazon. I'm telling you guys, it's easy. It took me 2 hours. 2 hours to publish the ebook. The paperback took a little longer, but the ebook only took 2 hours on Amazon. The only thing is, when you publish with Harlequin, your book is everywhere like that. They have distribution everywhere. When you self-publish, you gotta do your own hustle. You gotta, you know, just because it's there doesn't mean people are gonna buy it. So you gotta do your own hustle and sell your book. So that's the difference between the two. But if you're looking at self-publishing, I say do it yourself. Don't worry about the other houses. Do it yourself.
Okay, thank you. So this one is a bit long. So do you create a flow chart of sorts so you know where the story will go, or do you just start writing? I always wonder how twists and turns come about, and I wonder how subjects or themes from the end can tie back to the beginning.
So when I wrote my first book, Ease Prescription, I just started free flow writing. I didn't flow chart anything. I just wrote the book. And that was the fun for me at the time, because I didn't know where the story was going to go. And so I was just writing, and I was just as curious to see where the story would go as anybody else. And so that was fun for me. Now, I don't write anything down. I just have it in my head. I have the main conflict. I have what my characters are doing. And then I do it kind of like a movie. I think of scenes. What's the first scene going to be? What's the second scene going to be? What's the third scene going to be? So, for example, Chocolate Friday, let me see, what would be a good one? Yeah, I have to put the books completely out of my head to write the next one. Otherwise, I end up writing the same thing over and over. So it's really hard for me to remember my books. So let's go with Vanilla Chocolate, the latest one. The first scene is she wakes up and she doesn't know where she is, right? But, you know, she could tell from her body, whatever she was doing, she had a pretty good time, right? Then she looks behind her and she sees a white guy and she's shocked. So that's the first scene. The second scene is she goes down and she's having breakfast in the hotel. And then who walks in? But the man she slept with last night. That's the second scene. The third scene, so you guys get, Raj, you're interrupting me. So that means shut up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm shutting up.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't. I was responding yes, but I do have some other questions. Are there any conflicts you stay away from, or are you wide open to the possibilities?
Well, I write romance, and so a lot of people in the South buy romances, and so there's some things you kind of want to, like House Guest. She has a women's clinic, but I stayed away from abortion, because I didn't want to offend my readers. So there are some things that you kind of have to stay away from. I kind of stay away from major political things, but I have to tell you, I'm writing the book Chocolate Drop, which is the third book in the chocolate romance series. And I had a whole different storyline. I mentioned it in a previous Facebook Live. They were going to be in Spain, and I was going to bring the 800-year history of the Moors into the book and blah, blah, blah. But with COVID and all this craziness that's happening, my gut and what I want to write is about now. And so my heroine is a pulmonologist, so she's looking at lungs. And my hero runs the morgue in the hospital. And it's the hospital is Seattle General. And so I'm going to have the protest in it. I'm going to have a white nationalist in it. So this next one is going to be really based on the current times and probably the closest that I get to political issues, but I got to write it.
And you just answered the next question, I kind of think. How do you come up with story ideas? So in that example, you're saying I'm writing what's happening now because that's where you are and you want to write that. Are there any other ways being in a cafe, hearing a friend's story?
Well, I pay attention because I tell you, truth is stranger than fiction. You know, and I'm really sensitive because when I first started writing, my husband said, look, I don't want to see us in any of your romance books. So I honor that. And I figure my friends don't want to see their stuff in a romance book. So when I feel it, I say, hey, I could write about that. Do you mind if I put that in my book? And then I get the yay or a nay, you know.
Okay.
So my friends are sprinkled in there a little bit. But I'll tell you, the world has so many things to write about. Just read the newspaper.
For someone who, this is more of my question, for someone who is having a hard time, like I want to write, but I don't really know the story, would you say something close to you or even your story a little bit, not quite directly, but would it be good to kind of start with your story?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do. I believe everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has something interesting that went on in their life. So yeah, 100%. But that's the beauty of writing. I mean, you can have part of your story and change it up and put somebody else's story in there and
perspectives.
Yeah.
So I think we have two more. Oh, actually, two more came in. So we have about four more. Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. So what prompted you to write romance in the first place?
I've been reading romance all my life. I have to tell you, my sister was 4 years older than me, and we shared a room until three of my brothers had to go to college before we had our own rooms. So we shared a room for most of our lives. And before I could read, she would read me romance to go to sleep. She would read me some Harlequin. So, you know, I just grew up with it. I love it. It's escapism. You know, I read the book and I'm not worried about what's going on in the world or if I'm bored or, you know, I carried a book around in my pocket. So I would whip my book out and start reading if I was standing in the grocery line. So I just love the genre.
Thanks. This question says, when you start writing, do you know what the ending is going to be? We know it's going to be happy. I think they were asking, do you know it's going to be happy? And they also said, thanks so much. And just wanted to know if you know the ending, what the ending's going to be.
Yeah, with romance, you know, they're going to be a happy ending. They're going to say, I love you. One thing I learned is you cannot end the book on a pregnancy and the readers don't know the sex. They get really mad at you. You better write a sequel and tell the readers what the sex is. So yes, I know it's going to be a happy ending, but that's the art. You know, how do they get there? How do you draw that emotion out of your readers? Mm-hmm. You know, so that's the beauty of how to get there. And like I said, it's $1 billion industry and we all know the ending. So
I think that's why I love reading, because I know it's going to be happy, even with the conflicts, right? Even with the ups and downs and the cliffhangers. It's like, this has to be happy at the end.
It's escapism.
Yes. So we have another question. So how are you going to share the presentation on Facebook? Are you sharing it with people registered? How are you sharing that? And the person said, well, John said, lots of potential emerging writers that may be inspired. Many thanks in advance.
You know, I hadn't thought about it, but it's on Facebook Live. So on Facebook, all you have to do is go to my website and play it, and you'll get the you will get the PowerPoint. And then if you're on Zoom, I don't know, Roz, what do you think? What is the best?
No, on Zoom, we can send those to folks who registered, right? We have their email addresses. So in a follow-up email, thank you guys for attending and registering. We can send that, but you're right. You know, we do have the Facebook Live feed that you can go and review it.
And also, Roz, you see my social media, so contact me and I'd be more than happy to share the PowerPoint with you. A lot of people help me to get to where I am. A lot of people. So I would love to help other people.
Thank you. Well, we're going to end it with this question. Okay. How can we encourage the next generation of artists and writers?
Well, that's a good question. I make myself available. I've spoken at schools and in the community. I guess keep making yourself available to people. I help one-on-one, but that's a good question. Read it to me again. Sorry.
Let me see, I go back in here.
How can we help the next generation?
Yes, how can we help the next generation?
Yeah, I guess the giving back and being available.
Okay.
Right, Marcus? My cousin is on there, Marcus Guillory, who is quite successful with quite a few movies and books. Marcus, what do you think? You'd have to type it in on Facebook Live.
And so also, I just kind of wanted to share, thank you, Edwina, this is great that we talked in the beginning, you have 9 published books, but you have a new one, Vanilla Chocolate. So I don't know if you want to share that one. We can actually get that on Amazon now, right?
That is correct. Okay. You can get it as an ebook and as a paperback. My next step is to figure out how to do the audiobooks.
Okay.
But, you know, a shout out to you, Roz. I mean, I really appreciate you highlighting artists, not just me, but I saw a cook on your show the other day, and then you had the 3 artists earlier today talking about movie production, etc. So a shout out to you for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. I love it's my passion. I love film, art, and theater books. So I always love highlighting, you know, people what they're doing. It's really exciting, but also inspiring to me. And Edwina was very gracious in May to come on my IG Live, and folks had questions. They were like, "You're gonna do a workshop?" And she was like, "Yeah." So and so she found some free time to do that. So definitely want to say yes to you for coming on and doing this. And let's see, I just want to make sure. So I got everyone. So we have someone, Melvina said, thank you for, I just want to read it right. So thank you. It was wonderful and very informative.
Thank you.
And so hopefully I got everyone's questions. Last call, we have a minute. Edwina has been really great with her information and time. So we do really appreciate it.
Oh, let me give one shout out. There's a gentleman named Alvin L.A. Horn. Also from Seattle. You guys have probably seen his books. He's a national best-selling author. But I'm going to be meeting with Alvin tomorrow, and we are going to do a joint book signing. So I'll keep everybody posted about that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and so that information that will be on your Facebook page?
Yeah, and then I'll be, once Alvin and I iron out the details, I'll be doing a media blast. We do know the location is going to be my house.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Great.
Look forward to that.
This was awesome. Thank you so much. And folks, I will send, oh, Lavera, you said hi, you had a question. I will be sharing the deck. And as Edwina said, I am Roz S. Murphy at Gmail. And you can also get me at Murphy Muse on Instagram. So please, if you have any follow-up questions, I definitely can follow up on those too. And then Edwina also shared her social media. So lots of ways to connect with us. And we really thank you for like spending, you know, an hour with us and getting this great information, and keep us up to date what's going on. You know, if you're starting off, you know, just let us know like, hey, I wrote my books in 2 months and now I'm ready to publish. We would love to hear your stories and what you got out of this.
And does everybody mind turning their video on just so I could take a quick picture?
Video on, please.
People.
I see my sister, Darlene. Hey, Darlene. Bernice.
Oh, there's my handsome husband.
Do you see the chat? Or do I need to close the chat? You're okay with the chat?
No, I don't see the chat.
Okay, good. All right, so everybody, Lavera, okay. I think we're ready to show.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me also get it.
I see you there, Aaliyah, with your hair thing on.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. And we, this is our first workshop in this series. If there's something that you want another deep dive on, let us know. You know, we're open, and, you know, also reach out to Edwina if you guys have a book club that you want to talk about. Vanilla Chocolate.
Yeah, I would love to do the virtual book signings if anybody's interested.
Thank you. And you guys have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So you got it ready. All right, we'll take it off Facebook Live.